Now I'd like to turn things over to Jessi Narducci to talk about top 5 tactics to manage resistance and succeed with adoption. Jessi, go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, thanks so much, Michael. Hello, everyone. Let me just get my screen up. Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yep, you're all good. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So my name is Jessi Narducci. I lead the adoption change management practice for all things Microsoft 365 at WM Reply. We're a global consultancy firm, as Richard had introduced us earlier. So this session will cover, just one second, different tactics you can leverage in your organization to really effectively manage resistance. But not only manage resistance, also it helped to build positive perception of a change. And also when you are building positive perception for changes, you're helping your organization become more change agile. And then as your organization does become more change agile and you see your adoption numbers succeed, you also are able to maximize your return on investment in things like Microsoft 365 Modern SharePoint. So I just wanted to cover some of the resistance trends that I myself have experienced, and I'm sure a lot of you in the audience have as well, which is that we work with organizations, enterprise organizations. They've made the commitment and the investment in Microsoft 365 and the various different applications. They're committed to transforming their workplace, but then when it's time to launch, they meet with a lot of resistance when it comes from either the, overarching organizational workplace or certain stakeholder groups within the organization. So some of the trends that we see time and again are really a lack of sponsors or influencers. So sometimes within the IT department, if it's being rolled out from IT, there isn't really an executive sponsor, or if there is, it's within the IT rather than within the business where you're actually trying to gain the buy-in. Another challenge is that a lot of times Office or Microsoft 365, it's being pushed, or major type changes are being pushed from within an internal IT organization, and it doesn't quite have the essential support from the different businesses or business units and work streams. Often we'll also see a change launched, so they're rolling out OneDrive to replace a home drive or something like that, and they won't really, as a project team, won't really connect the dots for the users for why this is happening. Why do I have to have my files migrated to OneDrive? How is it going to be, help me in the future, which is the next bullet point. What's in it for me? So how is this going to impact my life in a way that's positive? What's the benefit for me for adopting to these different changes in the workplace and these different technologies with their different capabilities? Often also what we see is there isn't any training at all. It's just been enabled and someone has pushed out one communication and says, guess what? Teams is here, now go use it. And what we've seen is if there isn't the right level of training in place, users can really struggle to actually understand how they use the tools. Also, there's other common resistance points that you're going to run into time and again, and I'm going to actually answer those later on in this presentation. A couple of them were, we've always done it this way. So, when you have an organizational mindset where it's very fixed thinking rather than growth thinking, how do you overcome that? Or, there's been a negative rollout in the past, or there was no change management planning around a change in the past. And so therefore you're trying to actually overcome resistance to a previous project in your own existing current project. And then of course, when you're talking about the absolutely wonderful and dynamite capabilities that come with Microsoft 365, there's a lot of confusion at times around which tool do I use when, especially for organizations that are not taking a segmented approach where they launch Teams and then they launch OneDrive, where they want to launch all of the tools at the same time. So these are just some common resistance trends that I'm going to address as we move through this presentation. So just before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick exercise, and I realize we're virtual, but for everyone out there, if you can open a Word document or a notepad or just an email, And try typing your name with the hand, only one hand, maybe your left hand if you're right-handed and vice versa. Or if you're like me, you can take out a piece of paper and using the hand you don't usually write with. So for me, that's my left hand because I'm right-handed. Try and write your name down and see what that experience is like. So I'm going to do it right now.
Done.
What was that?
I'm done because my name's only Don, so it was easy.
Okay, Don. Okay, well, Don experienced the race. So what you might notice in this exercise, and I just did it myself, which was that it's incredibly awkward for me to write with my left hand. I felt like kind of a little thrill of anxiety and also frustration because I'm in the middle of a presentation and it's taking too long and I'm under pressure to deliver this session for you. So this exercise is really just trying to show that even something like a small change that you're being asked to do can provoke a normal human reaction, which could be reluctance, it could be anxiety, it could be frustration, it could be confusion. So those are the things that, regardless of whether or not you're an adoption change manager, you're an IT director, you're an IT VP, you're an Office 365 success owner, I think that these are the things that we need to be conscious and aware of when we are doing our project planning. So because digital transformation or Microsoft 365 transformation, what it really comes down to is actually human transformation, people transformation. So yes, absolutely, we have to put the technical into place, but we also need to think about the people side, and that's creating a user journey. So you may be saying, well, Jessi, we have to do this anyways, and you're absolutely right. But one of the things to consider is that if you do create a strong user journey that starts pre-launch, so way before the change is launched, and you do a countdown up to launch, and then you do post-launch, whether it's communications, whether it's stakeholder management, your champions group, or whether it's training programs, really, even if you're in the IT side of the project, it's really good to be thinking about timelines and how to create that user journey. And you can see here we follow the ad card model. So this is awareness. The person on the left, she hasn't received any communications. Now we go to addressing desire in the ad card model. So understanding, okay, well, what is in it for me for a Teams rollout versus I haven't been told what's in it for me, so I have no idea how this helps me. Really getting to knowledge. So I have quick videos for training. I have a user guide that really helps me learn versus someone who's received no training at all, no communications. Ability, so there's a webinar demoing the tools. I'm allowed to ask questions if I need to so I can continue learning versus someone that has received no training and no help at all. And also reinforcement, I know where to get help. I can go and ask, even if I want to use advanced features, there's an outlet for me to be able to find that. So even though it may not seem like an overt resistance management technique, I just wanted to draw your attention to, if you create a good user journey that addresses awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement through stakeholder management, through a champions network, through communications, through training, through having a clear vision statement, you're going to have a user population and stakeholders that feel much more excited and they feel much more positively about the change. They feel like they know where to go to get help and information, and that will really address some of that anxiety and our human reaction to change. So before we move forward, any questions out there or comments? Does this make sense, the ad card? Okay, I'll take that as a yes and move on. So what I did is I went ahead and created, yes. Okay, great, thank you. I went ahead and created just a quick framework, and this is what I really use to help me when I'm doing adoption change management and helping enterprise organizations roll out global changes that are very complex and have very complex audiences and requirements and approval processes and resistant groups. I really do kind of follow these 5 key tactics when it comes to continuously managing change throughout a project. And again, really managing change will enable you to create more positive perception, capture a higher ROI, and see better, more successful adoption rates. So I'll just go over each one of these, in the next 5 slides. One will be managing resistance early and continuously, defining resistance by audience group and work stream, geography, any other categories you can think of that fit within your organization or an organization you're working with. Mitigate resistance with solutions. So that's really sitting down together as an extended project team or even a champions network and coming up with what is the plan, what actions are we going to take, who's assigned, who's responsible for chasing, which mitigation point. And then engaging sponsors and champions to manage resistance. So a lot of times, even if you do get a few executives, VPs, the C-suite to sponsor the project, oftentimes we fail to keep them aware of what resistance is and how they themselves should manage it. So it's really engaging those sponsors and champions, letting them know, here's the top, 5 to 7 resistance points, and then here's what we're going to, here's our common and united front for how we're going to manage them, what we're going to say to people who have these concerns, how we're going to address these concerns, either through communications training, etc. So just really keeping everyone, especially the influencers that can really help your project succeed, very much informed and keeping them aware of what actions they can take to help manage resistance. And then communicating resistance solutions and what's in it for me. And really making sure that that's in your communications from pre-launch all the way through launch, all the way through post-launch, and of course, embedding it into your training plans as well. So there's consistent messaging, but also letting the users know, we hear your concerns, here's our response to them. So we'll just start with the first one in the framework, which is manage resistance early. Really, I can't say enough how important and critical it is to manage resistance early in the project, but also continuously through the project. So before you even get to the point where you're going to go live, I would say in the very discovery phases of your project, when you're actually putting your project and your objectives together, really understanding and including that as a milestone of your project, a key objective, just similar to where you would have, we've technically deployed, for example, Exchange Online. So in addition to the technical checklist, you want to also create a checklist that's going to help manage people. And this applies even if you're not in adoption change management, you're just the one that's managing, the IT project, or you're a project manager, or you have to oversee the project. I would always recommend including resistance management as a key milestone in one of the earliest phases of the project, because if the more that you try to manage resistance early in the project, the smoother your rollout's going to go, because by the time you get to launch, the goal is that you should have managed most of the key resistance points, or you should be in the process of managing those resistance points when you launch. And that will just ensure that you have less of a negative backlash, you have more positive perception, because users are understanding that you understand what their concerns are and you're addressing them as a project team. So the second step in the framework is defining resistance for key audiences. So this is a very important step, and it may seem like a lot of work, but at the same time, if you manage this early on before you even get to launch, you're going to be in better shape for the success of the project overall. So really sitting down and taking a look at your organization, the key work streams, the key divisions, departments, the key roles, and really kind of anticipate as a project team or an extended project team, or if you've already set up a champions network, bring them in so that you get feedback from the business streams, right? We want to understand what the business streams, what their resistance is, so that we can come up with a good mitigation. So really sitting down, segmenting out your audience, anticipating, just brainstorming in a session. Okay, what do we think the resistance points are going to be? And then create a use case or a scenario in which you come up with a solution. The way that I've managed this from a consulting capacity is really having all of the key players that are in the project team, the extended project team, but I also like to include the project sponsor as well, and also champions or key designated influencers from the business. Sit down together, anticipate the resistance points, define them all out. Another tactic you can take, which I've used before with great success, is sending around a digital survey that asks employees about their pain points or resistance points. So this could be sending it out to your champions group if you don't have the ability to send it to the entire company. If you can, even if you're thinking about leveraging one of your departments or key divisions as a pilot group, send it out to them. Also, a way is to conduct one-on-one individuals with a cross-section of key groups. So if you have HR, you have finance, you've got your sales teams, just various different departments and divisions, get some people from each one of those and just interview them, ask them about what their resistance is going to be. And you'll be surprised, they'll be very forthright. I've really found that interviews are a great way to get really clear answers on what people are actually reluctant about and then be able to address them before launch. And then really the value of a champions group is, ask all of your key business heads to designate champions or influencers. Invite the champions to a session. So this could be a 30-minute session, hour session where you brainstorm and define all the resistance points. I've done this approach simultaneously with sending a survey, and that's been a really thorough way of understanding, okay, this audience is going to react this way, and so we need to come up with a use case or a plan. So I've just defined out a couple of key audiences, executives and admins. You may want to really consider, okay, well, what are the executives, what may some of their resistance points be? And then you may want to focus a training session or just an awareness session to let them know what's going on with them and their admins. You can pull together champions network. You can also start building use cases for example, first line workers or a legal compliance department that may have different needs when it comes to things like data retention policies. So really understanding and anticipating that resistance and then sitting down together and defining it is a great way to keep resistance in the forefront and to make sure that it's being managed before you even hit the launch phase of a project. So the third step is really about mitigating resistance. So this may seem obvious. Well, obviously, if you're going to define resistance, you're going to mitigate it. But I think in a lot of cases, we may fail to actually achieve this step, which is that we really need to go through, and even if you're just going to pick out the top 5 to 10 resistance points across the organization, let's say you sent a survey, you've done some interviews, you've interviewed your champions in a brainstorm session, and you've really come down with the top 10 critical resistance points. Even that is going to get you a smoother rollout. It's going to get you better adoption results if you manage those resistance points that are common across divisions, across geographies. So sitting down then with your defined list and then covering each resistant point and collecting ideas from the stakeholder to manage. So I don't consider this just a responsibility of the change manager or the project manager or just the core IT team. I think where I have achieved the biggest success as far as coming up with really solid mitigation solutions is really including people from the business. So if you have a champions group set up, include the champions. If you have a sponsor coalition, that's that top layer of executive leadership set up, include them. I had a CIO once who I invited to one of the sessions and his 2 vice presidents where we sat down together and we went through the top mitigation points. And then after the session, this was an insurance enterprise, actually pull me aside and say, thank you so much. I've never had anyone run through this exercise. He's like, I think I'm going to actually implement it going forward and make it an actual, I think he was talking about a project milestone for all of my, IT success owners to make sure that we're actually doing this going forward. So you really can get a lot of traction about doing something just as simple as setting a session, inviting people to it, and then going through and mitigate it. Another thing that I like to do to make sure that we're moving forward, and I've done this both as a consultant, but also internal to an IT organization, a very large global IT organization, was once you figure out what your actions are, you need to assign them an owner. So if there needs to be a tech solution that's come up with, if we need to look into data retention policies, you just want to make sure that it's either in your project plan or your adoption change management plan that you're assigning out responsibility and deadlines to individuals who are on the core team. That will really help make sure that you're actually following up with resistance. I would also implement the solutions into your communications and training programs. So if a lot of individuals, let's say a previous example would be, for example, I worked with an enterprise where they had almost every department had this very clunky check-in, check-out SharePoint process where documents had to be checked in, and it created a lot of inefficiencies because people would forget to check in the document, then it was locked and no one could get into it. So that was a pain point. We created a use case, like a training user guide and a quick little video that showed how to co-author on Teams as a solution to that resistance or pain point. So really understanding and being able to set up your communications and training, and again, emphasizing what's in it for me. So if one of the top pain points across the organization is or one of even the top asks is, I'm not able to collaborate on documents in a way that's seamless for me and my team. You want to connect the dots. Well, here's Teams, here's OneDrive, here's SharePoint, and here's how you can co-author successfully with your team to save time, increase productivity, etc.
Hey, Jessi.
Jessi. Yeah.
Oh, got a little.
Oh, sorry.
No. All right, let's try it again. The question that I had about resistance is, in my experience, the most resistant people are the people who don't participate, or they actively avoid you. How do you engage those people? How do you reach out and get those people to pay attention to you?
Yeah, so this one takes a little bit of maneuvering. It requires a bit of finesse. So number one, the approach that I would take when going after, and I'm just going to use an individual here, but it's the same for a department, is you figure out, first of all, from, maybe asking your coworkers or colleague in a non-weird stalkery way, what the person values, right? So if they have certain objectives, if they are concerned with certain things, if they're like a CFO, you want to get to the bottom of really what motivates them in their decision-making process and what's going to appeal to them. That's not always easy to do, right? Because you may need to actually talk with a couple of individuals inside of a particular department. So I worked that a couple of ways where I've created what I think is a problem solution result. And in the result included what's in it for the person I'm trying to persuade. And then I've sent it, and I usually do it in one slide or like 2 slides, something very, very short, or just a kind of an email, but that's very not too overwhelming for people because they don't want to read the huge thing. Yeah, you got to just keep it brief, but pretty much a brief of how I'm trying to solve a problem. I need their help, and here's what's going to be in it for them, or would like to speak with them about how they can get value out of it. Then I put a meeting on their calendar. If for whatever reason they're declining, I really go around to the other people that they work with or their peers, and I ask for advice, because a lot of way to get around resistance is actually, you'd be surprised, just asking people for advice and telling them you have a good idea and you're trying to get support and help for it really actually appeals to people. I mean, if you have a good idea and you're actively trying to solve a problem, people will usually, they'll get on board and they'll yeah, like, how can I help? Well, here's my advice for, how you go and do this. So
yeah, so kind of by expressing your interest to help to many people in the organization, it'll kind of seep in to that one person who's very resistant.
Yes.
That's what I think I'm hearing you say. And focus on the what's in it for me, which could be one topic for the department or the organization, but that it may be slightly different spin or a completely different what's in it for me for that very resistant individual.
That's right. And you need to get to the bottom of what that is and then come up with a way to solution it. So for example, I had an extremely resistant, I was working with this one client and I was doing my usual where I interviewed, I asked, I was putting together a champions network inside the organization I was consulting with. And one of the people on the list was the head of the legal and compliance departments. And man, she gave me an earful. There had been negative, results before for previous rollouts. Her new hires and terminations weren't being processed correctly through the IT processes. She didn't have any idea what Exchange Online was or what it would do for her. Same with OneDrive and Teams. So she was just really outright refusing to use any of it. She didn't want any of her individuals involved in it. So really for that, it was just a matter of, okay, let me schedule another meeting with you because I really want to understand exactly what your, your pain points are, your resistance is, and really just enabling her the forum where she could really vent about everything she was worried about, everything that had gone wrong in the past. And so I put together a use case. And of course, I'm a adoption change management consultant. I can't solve everything. So what I did is I took it back to the project team. We got, I think, director joined the call or something, and we all together, and it was the extended project team, so some of the engineers that owned kind of the different services, we got together and we went through, and a lot of her concern was really around how previous changes had been rolled out as far as onboarding. And then also data retention. She felt that new hires were not being given the correct data retention because if you are in litigation or compliance, legally you have to keep documents that are in litigation for a certain number of years. So it was really sitting down as a project team, and she kind of felt that she wasn't being listened to in the past. So again, just listening to the person, listening for what they're after, what's going to make their life easier, and then creating a solution and taking it back to them and say, okay, here's my solution. And then they come back and say, okay, we'll tweak this and this, So it's really just listening for what they need, listening for, what their past experience has been, and then coming back with an actual solution.
Yeah. So it sounds like empathy is a key tool there.
It is. Active listening, which I probably should have put in this presentation somewhere.
Thanks a lot.
Of course. Thanks for the question.
Jessi, can I ask a question also? I know
Sure.
you're pressed for time, but I wanted to ask specifically, this is Andrew Bond from Siemens. Do you notice a difference in the survey questions that you ask upper management than you would a frontline worker? And do you have any examples of some of these questions that you would ask on the surveys?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what phase you're sending out a survey in. So if I was doing this in kind of a discovery phase, I probably wouldn't directly send a survey to the sponsor coalition unless it was in preparation for like a workshop we were doing to kick off. And in that case, I would honestly keep it really simplistic and say, okay, we're rolling out Teams, which is a collaboration platform. What are your pain points? What do you think are going to be anticipated resistance points across the organization? What are challenges that you yourself are concerned about, and what capabilities do you want? Now, I know that sounds a bit high level and vague, but sometimes when it comes to working with executives, I found the easiest way is just to kind of keep it very high level, because they're definitely willing to share their thoughts. And as representatives of their entire work stream, they kind of know those things best. When it comes to just like say champions or just end users in general, the questions are pretty much the same. Really just understand, like making sure that there's a note into as far as why they're being asked these questions, that we're working as a team to begin to prepare for the launch of something like, I'll just use Teams as an example, and we just want to understand what are your current pain points. And honestly, I'm going a little bit beyond resistance right now, but in a lot of scenarios where you get the results back, if you have their pain points and their regular day-to-day tasks, you'll be able to come up with the user scenarios where you can map those out. So if they need something where they need to be able to assign work to their team and manage it, it could be something like Planner. If they need a one place to keep all of their chat messages, co-author documents, it's Teams. If they need, to be able to restore documents once their PC is crashed, it could be a OneDrive solution. So it's really just creating scenarios or trying to get the information from the surveys for scenarios that you can create and then communicate back as solutions. Did that make sense? I felt like that was pretty long-winded.
Makes perfect sense. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So the fourth lever here, or the fourth step in the framework, is really engaging and coaching champions and stakeholders. So really creating awareness of resistance and also solutions for leadership and sponsors, and letting them know how to respond. It's the same with champions. So I would even, I would do a resistance management session with champions as part of my adoption change management plan in the discovery phase, but also in the planning phase and the delivery phase, just to make sure that in every phase you're capturing any new resistance that has surfaced that you haven't already addressed previously. And then you just want to let them know, okay, if someone says, well, I don't know the difference between Yammer and Teams, how do they respond to that? Just really giving them the answers that they would need to go out and really provide that peer-to-peer support. And I will just reinforce here, I like to say this all the time because it has been effective time and time again, really putting together a champions network. So regardless of whether you're owning the project from IT or you have a communications team or a change team, just really putting together a good cross-section of individuals from every geography, every work stream across your organization is really a great way to start changing it. Especially if you have negative perception in previous projects to overcome, you're going to start seeing a shift of negative perception into positive perception because the champions are out there helping people with these questions, providing a face-to-face, face-to-face solutions, but also just helping people become excited about all the capabilities, because really Microsoft 365, the sky's the limit with these capabilities and how it can improve, your day-to-day work life. So then also engaging other key stakeholder groups. It could be HR, communication, sales, could be your legal and compliance department, any key business stream that has influence over a large number of people in the organization. You just want to keep them up to date. You want to tell them, listen, we are hearing your resistance points and here's what we're doing to try to solution them, or here's how the capabilities are actually a solution to some of this resistance. And of course, always emphasize what's in it to me. Doesn't matter if it's individual or a group or a department or whatever. Always try to go into a talk or a meeting where you're going to talk about resistance points, already having kind of thought through, okay, well, what can I say to appeal to them? What is a business problem they need to have solved, and how can the tools or the change I'm rolling out actually provide a solution to that? So the next step is really about communicating solutions. So you want to ensure that employees know why the change is happening. This doesn't just apply to Teams and OneDrive and Yammer. It applies to any change you're rolling out. And it's one of the most basic things that you can do, and a step that almost every organization misses, or they create a vision statement that says what's in it for IT, but not what's in it for the individual. So really ensuring that you have a vision statement that is actually being communicated before the launch even happens in your pre-launch communications and training planning. Have the why. I would even go so far as have a little, 60-second video that actually just goes in and says, hey, Teams is coming and here's why. Here's how it's going to make your life better. Here's what's in it for you. So again, just that one step of really addressing awareness and desire, right, from our ADKAR model: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So making sure you're communicating that in advance, so pre-launch, then at launch, and then of course reinforcing it. But also you want to include solutions to top resistance in communications and training. So if one of the biggest things is confusion over co-authoring, you're going to want to make sure you have a section in your webinar or tools demo that really does a good job covering co-authoring, or you're going to want to have a special advanced, live event where you specifically just cover co-authoring and questions around it. That's really going to help reduce resistance, is understanding where those gaps are. And again, digital surveys are a great way to do that. So even after you launch, sending a survey and saying, okay, what questions do you still have about Teams? What are your pain points in Teams? And you could even do multiple choice, which is I do sometimes with an open text box. And then as a project team, you come back and evaluate that and you come up with a mitigation solution, whether that's what I like to do is create either a quick little video that addresses it, or you can create a user guide. I don't really much care for the user guides that have a lot of dense IT language in them. What I like to do is kind of create an infographic that really shows the challenge, how the tool or the capability is a solution, and how, what's in it for me, what are the results I'm going to see if I leverage this solution. So now I thought I would, because when Michael wrote me and wanted to know if I wanted to deliver this session, he actually gave me a couple of examples. So I thought what I would do is just, because they are such common examples, we all face them, whether we're consultants or we're internal and we're trying to roll out a project. I thought we could just take a minute to discuss some of the top challenges. So I think anyone who has tried to roll out a change in their organization has probably come across this one, which is, but we've always done it this way. So there's a couple of different ways or tactics that I use to try to get around this. I maybe put them in the wrong order here, but the first one would be to reach out one-on-one. So if there's a meeting coming up, excuse me, where I know that there's going to be executives or business decision makers, where I know it's kind of high stakes and it may impact the outcome one way or the other. What I like to do as a strategy is I like to actually reach out one-to-one to the meeting participants. And you might say, okay, well, with the C-suite, it's kind of hard to get on their calendars. So my approach would just be then, okay, well, who are their VPs? Like, can I get 10 minutes with them? And it doesn't have to be super formal. It could just be stop by their office, obviously not right now. Give them, schedule a meeting on their calendar, see if they accept it. And, you could even schedule it for 15 minutes or just shoot an email and just say, hey, I have 15 minutes. I've got a solution, not a problem, a solution I want to run by you. And really just talk to them about what the value is for them, what's in it for them. If they have a business problem that can be solved by one of the various different Microsoft 365 applications, build a case around that and show them, okay, well, if you have a lot of people in your organization who are using these clunky Excel documents or Word documents for a process, like let's get you onboarded when it comes to what Power Platform can do for your organization. How would a Power App solve this? If reporting is a huge problem, like you don't have any clear visibility into reporting for your department, Power BI is a way to create those dashboards and solve that business problem. So it's really about trying to get buy-in on an individual level. I would also, because I think with executives, numbers do tell a story. So if you have statistics, that's great. If you don't, send a poll around. And even if it's just to your own department, or you can ask HR, or you have another department you're friendly with, or you can just reach out to all of your close coworkers, because I've done this in the past as well, and just say, hey, can you circulate this poll around? And Microsoft Forms is great for this. It's perfect for this. You can basically get, the more responses you get, obviously, the better your stats are going to look. But you can go in and you can show in your presentation, let's say you're in a meeting with decision makers, you can show, okay, I did a poll of 600 or however many hundreds you can get. Maybe it's only like 29 people, who knows? But I did this poll, and these people are asking for these capabilities, which OneDrive, Teams, Yammer has, or these are their pain points. They can't, they don't have their video calls aren't that great. They, don't have a place where they can co-author documents, and then you explain, how Teams can do that. So that's kind of the way that I go about trying to get buy-in before the meeting even happens, because if you can get a couple of these executives on your side, what you're going to notice is if you did it in advance, excuse me, on the meeting itself, you're more likely to have these advocates, and they'll actually be more likely to speak up for you. So when you're trying to present to a good group, if you already have allies in that group of individuals that will point out some of the benefits, you're going to have a much easier time kind of turning the tide in the room itself. I hope that makes sense. Also, it's hard to do this. You got to be kind of subtle about it, but focusing on focusing on fixed versus growth mindset. So this is a new strategy I've just become aware of, where you have individuals in a room, and it doesn't matter what level they've achieved in the organization, but it's really, there are individuals that have a fixed mindset, which is, we've always done it this way, I'm going to stay here in my comfort zone and not innovate. And then we have growth mindset, which is changing to, okay, well, now we need to grow as a culture, as an organization, we need to grow our business results, etc. So just kind of subtly inferring that, you know, what can we do in this room to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? Because culture and technology and capabilities, they're changing so rapidly that we need to make sure that our workforce actually keeps up with those. And then I also, another tactic use, which is present use cases from other organizations that have achieved results. So I know at one of our global telecom companies, one of their strongest advocates in the business, you know, she was prepared for the initial conversation. She had a lot of different test cases that we had helped her with, where she went in and said, okay, well, this organization has done this organization has rolled out Yammer, this organization is rolling out Yammer, and they're doing an employee ideation campaign that has actually helped them save $1 million in the last year, just by, you know, running a campaign. I think it was called If It Was My Money. And they asked, they ran a Yammer, excuse me, they ran a Yammer campaign where they asked employees to think about ways that the bottom line could be positively impacted by saving money or generating revenue. And the top, I think 9 of them got assigned to executives. And so over the course of the year, they were able to work out that it added to $1 million in revenue. So just using cases like that, where you can actually show, hey, something as simple as running an ideation campaign on Yammer can actually have clear and resounding business impact, is a great way to get people to understand the value that you're trying to communicate. So another challenge that we face all the time is, you know, it hasn't worked in the past. So you can see here the example that was shared with me. This week I was told we tried a champions network a year ago. It had support from within IT, but got shut down by business units. This is a common thing, happens all of the time. This is why having going and approaching individuals from an individual point of view and trying to get their support individually is a great way to make sure that when you're in a meeting or in a room where decisions are being made, you're prepared to manage the resistance right then. So one of the things that I would actually bring up, if this was something, I would say, well, let's include a sign-up volunteer method, because in a lot of cases, champions are designated from the business. I've actually experienced this myself when I was internal, trying to roll things out from an OCM perspective, which is that the people that were designated are too busy. They have no time, and they're not excited. They don't really know why they're being asked to do this. So sometimes putting something as simple as putting up a news article, work with your comms team, put up a news article and just say, hey, we're rolling out all this great new technology for anyone out there who wants to be on the forefront, who wants to embrace the change, who wants to, learn the new technology or get your hands on it first, please sign up to be part of our Champions Network. And you'll be surprised at how many volunteers you get. And then you can go into this meeting with these business executives and say, well, I've got 309 people signed up who actually volunteered and want to be champions. They weren't just designated. Also, enlist as much support from the business stakeholders as you can. I think I mentioned this already, but I would reach out to them individually before any kind of workshop or key meeting was being set up. If you can't get to them directly, try going to whoever their direct reports are and really create a case. Because a lot of times when you ask people for help, like, hey, this is such a great change that could really help our organization, and Teams is really awesome. You can co-author documents, whatever you want to say. You'll be surprised. People actually will kind of get on your side because you're asking them for help, and they may cascade that up, right? Up to their VP, up to the, their chief executive. So leverage other individuals to really try to make your case. And I would do all of these things kind of in advance. And then again, leveraging use cases from other organization successes. So even just doing a quick Google search of results, you can put together a quick use case and say, hey, this is how it's impacted the bottom line at these other organizations, or here's an approach that has worked at, another organization. And that will help to turn the tide in a lot of cases, especially if you're walking into a meeting where the stakes are really high and it's going to kind of be a make or break situation. Just do some groundwork early with stakeholder management. So I thought I would just put together kind of a quick high level, how I kind of work, which activities go in which phase of the project. So again, this is very, very high level. But for the discovery is really, I think it's a really good idea, and I very rarely ever see this in project plans, where resistance management is actually a milestone. So to me, what resistance management in a milestone would look like would be, we sit down, we send a survey, we also sit down as an extended project team with our champions, but if we don't have champions, then the extended project team, we define the resistance points, we brainstorm them, right, and solution them out, and then we assign them if their actions are necessary. So for example, if your legal department has data retention policies, we'll assign it to the owner who owns the data retention policies and make sure, that there's an onboarding program, et cetera. So that would be something that I would do in the discovery phase with the project team, with the champions team, if they are in place. And then also, I do like to include sponsors in it. So I will include everyone up to the CIO in this session because I've had success with it before. But of course, when you're working with an organization or you're internal to an organization, you'll kind of have to gauge, what the culture is and if that dynamic will actually work. In the development stage, so kind of the planning stages, again, sending digital surveys to champions. If I can get permission from comms, sending it out to the entire organization is even better. And then really scheduling a solution or a session with the project team to collect mitigation ideas from your champions, from your project team, and then really in the planning stages, including those in communications and training. If let's say that you're an IT director and communications and training are not definitely you don't feel like it's under your umbrella, get all of the mitigation actions and then provide them to the communications and training team or your change team if you're lucky enough to have a change team. Provide them with the solutions and how the tools are, the what's in it for me for each of the tools, and then communications and training and change management, they can sculpt that into a good message to include, in the full pre-launch, launch, post-launch comms and training programs. So for delivery, I would continue to coach champions on solutions because once you launch, the kind of goal of your champions is to be out there creating positive perception, helping answer questions, but also help manage resistance. Also, just being sure that you communicate solutions to top pain points or use case scenarios. Just making sure that if additional ones come up in your launch phase that you didn't anticipate already, you can then build a quick use case. Like I said, I like to use a quick little video or an infographic and send that out or post it on an intranet hub if you have modern SharePoint. And then, really trying to celebrate successes. Hearing from individuals who are using the tools is a great way to overcome resistance because people are very interested. We know this from reality TV and social media. People are interested in what other people are doing and saying and how they're using things. So if one team is experiencing successes, if you're a change manager, obviously you want to include that in your comms and training. If you're in IT, on the IT side, ask your communications training or change management areas to, craft a newsletter around successes, or even if you've heard a success yourself, ask the person to, provide a couple of paragraphs about what's working, for example, with Teams, and then get it off to comms and training and have them, send it out in a news article that's posted on your intranet hub. So celebrating successes is absolutely, in the reinforcement phase, a really great way to subtly manage resistance. And now that brings us to the close of my presentation, but I'm happy to take any and all questions. Also curious if anyone found, some of these tactics useful.
Yeah, so if anybody has comments or questions, just come off mute.
Go ahead.
I think there's a little bit of an echo.
Oh, it sounds like it stopped, maybe.
Okay.
So go ahead, whoever had a comment there.
Yeah,
This is Jonathan.
Actually, somebody else started talking. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed.
Okay. I just wanted to say that this was a really, really informative session, the way that you tied all the different pieces together, and some of the, I love that grid that you had up a couple of slides ago about how to attack the different issues. So very well done.
Thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I've used some of the techniques myself, and you've added quite a bit to some of the holes in some of the things that I had. So thank you.
Okay, great. Hope the new techniques come in handy.
This is Jonathan Handler. I had the pleasure, I guess, of being a first generation PC manager. So this brought back lots of memories. But one thing I wanted to mention is that back in those days, I worked for an IT manager, and he had this acronym above his door. And what the acronym stood for, and I'm just going to give you the phrase, don't bring me your problems, or don't bring me problems, bring me solutions.
Yes.
I pay you to bring me, and the moral of the story was, I pay you, I keep you in this department to bring me solutions. I'm the one who hands out the problems. You come back with the solutions. And I think it's sometimes necessary to make this very explicit with people who will try to, push back at you and make you solve their problems. It's, so all of these techniques, I'm kind of glad to see, this whole question of sponsors and champions, and this concept has grown up over several decades, is all I can say. And, it's very, very helpful. And you really do need all those people, and you really do need informal networking and all of your soft skills. So this is in support of Ed also, because I recognized a lot of this. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jonathan. I realized that it was actually one of the most profound pieces of simple strategy I've ever received in my career, which is when someone said, Jessi, I know what the problems are. Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And I applied that to all of my change management tactics going forward, because it actually works. Sometimes it can be, you can be dealing with some very severe stakeholders, especially at the executive leadership level, and can be challenging to maneuver around them. But honestly, if you show them that you are trying to solve a business problem and how it's going to positively impact them or their team, they almost always will get on board and say, okay, well, maybe not this idea, but how about if you do this or add this onto it, or I'd be happy if you found out this. So absolutely trying to approach people with a solution is a good way to gain their buy-in and to get their assistance. Anyone else have any or feedback that you want to share? Does anyone else have any resistance management tips they'd like to share?
Sounded like somebody else was trying to get in, but I'm going to go ahead. This is Andrew Bond again from Siemens. I think that if you could provide an example, and I'm not telling you to do it now or asking you to do it now, but that the idea of the infographic with those three parts, that resistance, solution, and what's in it for me, it seems like that's job security. Kind of goes back to what the guys were just saying. And if you had an example of that you could, kind of champion, if you will, to people to say, hey, when you go into a meeting, if you use this kind of format, you've identified those problems or resistances, this is your proposed solution, and this is the what's in it for me. That in itself is that's powerful. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I love when coming up with the idea of the infographic, because it is a really simplistic way. And the way that I've approached it, absolutely what you're saying, Andrew, is that for champions, you can create a pretty good infographic just in a PowerPoint slide. And then the champions, if they come up, if they're hearing resistance that maybe you guiding the project don't know about, they can actually leverage that template to fill it out themselves. And I like to keep it very simplistic again, so that people don't have to read, a lot. It's really just very simple, laid out. Like, if you have these regular tasks, if you have these pain points, here's the capabilities that are going to provide a solution to those. And at one organization, I had the director of IT ask me to do a presentation on resistance management to a group of the change managers, but also to the technical team. And the number one thing they asked me, because I was actually presenting one of the infographics, was, can we have this template? Because we want to use it, like, going into the meetings. So I thank you so much. I think that's great feedback to hear. And I think other organizations I've worked with have absolutely found those templates and that very visual way of presenting, challenge, solution, results to users very, very effective in their, internal work as well.
Yeah, so this is Larry. I'll chime in with some experience that I've had, and this might sound a little kooky, but fostering champions through communities and cookies. So if I boil down like some of the experiences, the best positive experiences that I've had with change and adoption around building an army of helpers, it's around building communities, right? And I would say, like, the most successful experiences that I've had in my professional career around change management and adoption came about when Microsoft acquired Yammer. And the thing that I saw that was repeatable and that really worked was identifying, recruiting champions, giving them a sense of a community among themselves, especially in global and distributed organizations, and then using baked goods to get people to come to things. So like the champions would like sit outside. The one customer of mine at the time, it was they had large office facilities with cafeterias, and the champions would once a month, they would set up the little Lucy psychiatric counter outside of the cafeteria door, and they would give away cookies, and it was a way to get people to come to the table and engage them in conversation. But the champions, they would do this extra work for free, just for the pure enjoyment of it, because they had a sense of community among themselves. So like in the case of Office 365, you might develop champions around different products or different features that you're trying to get adopted, and then provide a forum. And nowadays you could use, Teams, a Teams persistent chat channel, or you could use a Yammer community, whichever, but it's a forum where the champions could connect to one another and share, hey, somebody asked me this question, how would you handle it? And then get input from the other champions. And then they become like a self-reinforcing community that is always out there, interacting with their peers in subtle, behavior nudging ways, getting people to adopt the new technology or solution. So champions, community, and cookies.
Yeah, I love that, Larry. Yeah, and I'm just wondering, what's the virtual cookie? We need to figure out some virtual cookie
that's a really good question, and one we're going to have to address and answer. I mean, I would look to folks on the phone if they have ideas about, what is the virtual equivalent of baked goods? What do you give out?
But I 100% agree with Larry. One of the best ways to really turn negative perception into positive perception is to build a good champions network and community, whether you're hosting it on Teams. I do like it when we're able to work with organizations that leverage Yammer. So we were recently working with a big organization that needed an accelerated Yammer launch due to the pandemic. And they really wanted their employees, who were, of course, had to work remotely in this very abrupt fashion. They wanted them to stay together. They wanted them to share ideas when servicing the customers, but also social distancing. So, they launched a Yammer Champions Network community, and it really helped reduce the amount of, I don't think there were any service desk tickets, because people in the communications could just pop over to that Yammer community and answer questions, and then they get that peer-to-peer support. I mean, it's always a good idea when you do an accelerated launch to have, someone from the IT department monitoring, a community like that. But it's pretty impressive to do a launch to tens of thousands of people in a week and a half and have no service desk tickets, just because you've in advance set up a Yammer community. So I think Larry's tactic is absolutely one of the best ways to go about managing resistance, but also helping the users have a positive experience. And then if you think about within the organization, if you set up a successful champions network, kind of depending on your culture and the requirements, but you can also re-leverage that champions for the next major technology rollout. So, if you're now going to focus on Power Apps, or you're focusing on OneDrive and you've only rolled out Teams, it's always great to have that community existing so that they can continue to help organizations. And you can also continue to expand and grow your champions network as well, so that you're over time really helping your organization become more change agile and have better perception and better reactions to change.
I've got an example and a potential virtual cookie for you there, Larry. One of the things that I found to be very useful, this is Ed Gallagher, found to be very useful in winning over people that have some resistance. It comes from back when Microsoft, did an update to Office, and I was helping somebody out with a problem. And they were complaining about, how this new version, everything's, different, and, the normal things that you very often hear. But what I did is I started talking to the person and asking them a little bit about what it was that they were working on, instead of just answering their question, and how it was that they were doing what it was that they were doing. And I tell you, when I showed them the smart fill handle in Excel, I was their instant best friend. And even though that feature had been out for a couple of versions in Office, because they didn't know about it, I didn't tell them that it had been around for a long time, but to them it was new, and it made what they were doing easier. And that was the cookie that brought them into embracing the fact that, hey, there can be some new stuff in here that really is going to help me.
I love that example. So really helping the users understand, like, this can make your life easier, and then that's the hook how you get them in. So yeah, always solving a business challenge or a day-to-day work challenge for someone, or for a group of individuals or an entire organization is a great way to manage resistance. And then taking that one step further and communicating it out to the rest of the organization is also a good way to celebrate the success, or celebrate the success of finding, you know, a good solution to probably a pretty standard pain point.
One of the things that I'll be doing on Monday with one of my clients is that I found out that they've been basically doing a lot of you know, Word documents that they have to go in and customize, you know, kind of like forms sort of things, but they've just been doing it with regular Word documents, and not even getting them into dealing with forms per se yet. I showed the office manager how to do a Word template, so that people weren't accidentally modifying the original Word doc all the time. And now that's part of the training I'll be doing with them on Monday. So that is something that they're going to be able to apply in a lot of different places. And we're actually using Teams to centralize where all these document templates are going to be stored. So that's a way of kind of getting into that, you know, how can we make all of this stuff work better for everybody?
You betcha, and I'm sure they're really excited about seeing all of it coming together like that in one central hub.
Thank you, Jessi, for wonderful presentation. It's very insightful. I think we all got a lot out of it, and a lot of good guidance there.